Cutting doesn't have to be hard. Focus on this particular method and you'll be well on your way to Master Chef status. I went through my first professional cooking class with a chef. He taught us how to use a knife, and it was one of the most eye-opening experiences that I've had, because he showed me one basic move and he said, this is all you ever will really need to know. Put all that fluff aside and just focus on this and get really good at this particular motion and this way of cutting. You really don't need to go to culinary school to be a great home cook. And you don't need the fanciest of knife skills to cook things for you and your family. But you do need some basic skills. The first thing you need to learn about knife skills is what knife is done for what job. Not all knives are the same, and not all knives are made for every single type of job. We have all different types of knives. We've got a fillet knife or a meat knife. We've got your typical paring knife. This is the one that a lot of times you would cut up like an apple, or you may cut up strawberries, something really small and delicate that you may need to peel or something along those lines. And then you have your basic chef knives. Now there is two different types of chef knives here. And you will see many different versions of this, but the main thing is they're typically gonna be anywhere from 6 to 10 inches, somewhere in that range. And these are your workhorses. This is the knife that can pretty much do about anything. And if you're only gonna have one knife, it should be this knife. So your chef knife needs to be a couple of things. It needs to be one, sharp. A dull knife is useless, and it's also dangerous. So make sure you're sharpening your knife regularly. Whatever method you use, make sure it's something that you can keep up. And then also it needs to be sturdy and needs to fit well in your hand. This is my favorite chef knife. This one is a little bit smaller and doesn't fit quite, it's also a little bit lighter. So for my wife, this is her favorite one. When you pick a chef knife, always make sure that it's something that's gonna fit good in your hand. You like the weight of it. This knife just feels perfect to me. So before I get started cutting anything, one thing that's really important is to make sure that you've got the cutting board nice and in a controlled space. So many times I see people and they'll have their cutting board way out here in front of them, they're leaning out. Make sure that your cutting board is nice and close. That way you'll have nice, good control of everything that you're doing. Also too, if you'll notice, this cutting board does not have any kind of feet or rubber backing, so I'm gonna put down just a nice wet rag because I don't want this cutting board sliding around on me. There's more than one way to use a knife, of course, but the one that we're gonna talk about, and this is the way that I learned, and it's the most basic, the easiest, it's great for beginners. That method is the rocking chop motion. One thing you need to know is when you're holding a knife, make sure that you're holding it properly so you have good control. I see so many people hold a knife and they hold it at the back, they have no control at all, it's really loosey-goosey. Normally that's one of the first things that I tell people to do is choke up on the knife to make sure that you have good control. Now, if you're uncomfortable with that or you don't like the way it feels, feel free to pull back here, but you definitely should not be anywhere back here. You should be as close up to the blade as you can get. This method, I'm gonna use a pinch grip. It's very simple. You pinch here onto the blade, and then you let your hand lay flat. Once I have my pinch grip, I'm gonna let my hand just naturally kind of flow here. I don't wanna be off the side of the knife, I want to be on top of the knife. This is gonna make sure that I'm not putting too much unwanted stress here, so over time I start to build up like carpal tunnel or some kind of issues. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have a nice flat wrist, and I'm just gonna go down and through, and that's gonna be my base motion, my base rocking motion. Now, this hand's not the one that you have to worry about getting cut. This is the one that you have to get cut. And I see so many times people that they'll hold things and they'll take it and they'll put their fingers out like this. That's an easy way to lose the tip of a finger, and we can't grow a tip back. What we need to make sure that we're doing is we're using kind of a bear claw or a curled in motion. So I teach it as the bear claw. So basically take that thumb, because that thumb's the one you're gonna forget about, take those fingers, push them down. That way, if I do end up getting cut, it's gonna be just a little surface cut and it's not gonna be taking off the tip of a finger. This can be a little bit more difficult with smaller items. Make sure that you just kind of barely grab onto here and you're gonna go down and through. And that's the basic motion. So I've taken off the tip here, and then I'm gonna create a flat surface, come right back here, down, and through. On your chef knife, when you're doing your basic chops, just remember that there's pretty much about 4 to 5 inches right in the center is what you want to get things broken down to. So if you have things that are a little bit larger, make sure that you're breaking them down to a smaller, more manageable piece. When you're just getting started, don't worry so much about the speed, but worry about the technique. What you're wanting to try to do is you're wanting to try to go down, through, and then pivot the knife back. Down, through, pivot the knife back. And over time, as you get used to cutting more and more stuff, your speed will come. As you learn to cut things more evenly, you'll notice that your cooking gets better too, because things cook evenly when they're cut all the same size. A really great way to practice knife skills is to get out your cutting board, get out your knife, and cut up a lot of stuff all at once. These particular ingredients are going to be used later on for a stir fry. So I'm gonna make sure I get them nice and thin, so they're gonna cook a lot faster. That's another thing about your knife skills. As they get better, you're gonna be able to pick up some skills like cutting things a little bit thinner so that it cooks faster. Because in this kitchen, the faster I can cook and the faster I can get cleaned up, the better. Yeah, I got a future video planned, and we're gonna use these ingredients for one of my recipes. So I'm doing what I say, I'm prepping them ahead. When I'm cutting something smaller like garlic, I do tend to still use my chef knife, and the reason is because I could pull out a smaller knife, but I like to try to keep dishes to a minimum. Let's say that we wanted to do something like a fine chop or a mince or something in that range. The technique that I would use is what we call like the triangle. And so what I'm doing is I've still got the exact same grip, and I'm gonna hold here, but what I'm gonna do instead of this hand, because there's really nothing for me to grab, I'm gonna just lightly rest it over the top of my knife, and I'm not putting a lot of pressure. I'm putting just a very light kind of holding pressure, and I'm just gonna use that triangle and go back and forth, just like that. It's gonna take time to build up those skills, but repetition and practice is what's gonna be your best friend. I always say it's kind of like making a free throw. It's not that hard to make a free throw, but to shoot 80, 90% at free throws, you gotta do a lot of practice. And knife skills are similar. It's just that simple. That's it. Stop watching all the other videos. You're done. You know everything you need to know. Now get out there and practice.